All right. We got the Canadian Tax Federation, the CTF Taxpayers Advocate. We were just talking about it, that call it a slush fund. We're talking about the latest news that came out recently about the Canada Strong Fund. We got the Hub, who are serious policy thinkers, and they call it a deficit finance subsidies in, a patriotic clothing format. The Globe and Mail, Canada's paper of record, call it something thought up on the fly. Ivy League economists, professors, they call it unusual and potentially risky. Rebel News calls it a liberal scheme. Conservative MPs call it boring to gamble. So it doesn't matter whether you're in the mainstream news or not mainstream news. A lot of people do not like the Canada Strong Fund at all. The government themselves, of course, they call it nation building. Well, I don't know. What are your thoughts, Lacy?
Yeah. I mean, they refer to it, like Mark Carney, he referred to it as a sovereign wealth fund. And what I was reading and watching to learn more about it, it's not a sovereign wealth fund as they are in other countries. But they're trying to call it that so that it seems better than it really is. But, deficit fund, debt fund, slush fund, bad idea. I don't know, all of the above.
Well, let's dig into it a little bit. Like when you brought it up to me the other day, because sometimes it's, this is what I love about our partnership. We can't all be thinking and focusing on the same things all the time, right? I'm focusing on one thing and I may not even know what's coming down the pipeline in the news, but it's good because we can bring things to each other's attention. When you brought it up to me about the Canada Strong Fund and we ought to talk about it, I'm like, yeah, we definitely need to talk about this so much because number one, our mentor, R. Nelson Nash, he always talked about, just really be careful of like the lies in the marketplace. And quite often how there's a lot of financial instruments out there that are labeled a certain way, but are completely misleading. And I feel like this is something that definitely falls in that same vein of like what to be careful of. For example, the registered retirement savings plan. It ought to actually be renamed registered retirement investing plan because actually the truth of the matter, when you really break it down to what you can actually do with it, it's actually a way to invest. It's not necessarily savings because it's not guaranteed, right? So
Right.
Like similar to here, the sovereignty, like this is supposed to be Canada. How did he label it? This is supposed to be like a sovereign way for us to go forth in the Canadian.
Yeah, like, build Canada. But here's the thing. One thing that I learned is like Norway has a very strong sovereign wealth fund.
Yes, but they saved for
Yeah,
it.
and they don't invest in Norway. They don't invest in their own country. Like their sovereign wealth fund does not invest in their own country, is my understanding from what I was reading and watching online. So it's like, I feel like he's trying to label it as something that it's not to cover up the fact that, well, we don't really know how it's going to work, but we want Canadian taxpayers to put their money into it. And also, we can't tell you how much you're going to get back.
I think what's interesting about the whole thing, and I may be echoing pretty much the same sentiments that all the other skeptics and critics are talking about with the Canada Strong Fund, is just like, well, so you're going to create a crown corporation, which is owned by the government. We don't have a say in how that gets run. And it's supposed to be for the people. So first of all, like, where is this money coming from? Currently, our own debt issues are through the roof into the billions, right? And everything that we also talk and teach about with the infinite banking concept is like, who's in control of how you finance anything, right? And also trying to get away from the snakes and dragons. Well, first of all, Canada doesn't own all of its own debt, right? Like a lot of our debt is actually foreignly owned. So he who owns the debt is in control, and Canada is barely in control of itself. So I'm like, oh, what are we doing here? Like when we haven't solved a major issue that we have going on over here,
We're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and we're just starting start trying to start something else with money we don't even have. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Because he's looking to, where's the money going to come from? It's coming from us borrowing. And the reason why I'm saying that is because he made it known publicly that we have a really good international score for debt, like for being able to borrow from somebody else internationally. And it's like, okay, this triggered in me. I just want to use like kind of like the mortgage analogy. Anyone who mortgages anything, kind of like within the fiat matrix of things, where on a personal level, in order to borrow money from the bank, we have to have a good credit score, right? And our own understanding of ownership is sometimes, it's quite often very skewed, because we don't actually own our home until it's 100% paid for. It's very much still owned by the lender until you are 100% paid. And so it's kind of like a hope, pray, wish model, this Canada Strong Fund, because if you're borrowing, like anyone can tell you that if there's two ways to invest in something, one is better where you're investing in something that you've already saved for and then invest, rather than borrowing to invest in something. Right? Because there's just more added risk.
This can be relatable in so many different situations that we come into in our life. If something is meant to be and it's what you're supposed to be doing and it's God's will for your life, you're going to see that clearly and you're going to feel peace. If it's something that you wrestle with and it's hard to get done, it's probably not the path you're supposed to be taking. If we have to borrow this $25 billion to start this wealth fund, well, maybe we should start paying off some of our debt as a country before we start borrowing more. It just doesn't make sense.
You know, and I thought too, like at some point I was kind of looking into the fact, well, is this like, you know, because time is very fluid, you know, and we can only keep track of so much. I'm like, is this like one of his federal election ploys? But no, he just got elected like a year ago. So it's really not about that at all. But it's interesting because we never really know what's going on. Like there are probably a million different stories and agendas going on in the background. What spurred this on in the first place, right? Not only is it like a day before the budget's being considered and all that sort of stuff, but it's just like, what is he doing this for? But does it actually even really matter? What is this all for? Because in the end, our bandwidth as individuals, as business owners, as families, I don't know about you, Lacy, but I certainly, when I was younger, I was not politically inclined. In fact, the whole political conversation and looking at things from a political angle, just like my bandwidth for it, it just utterly frustrated me because I didn't understand anything. I thought it was just all bullshit. I didn't have time for it. I wanted to ignore it. I didn't want to be a part of any of it. And yet at the same time, now that I am getting to different vintage, so to speak, I'm starting to appreciate how that all plays a role in our world. And I guess what it comes down to is like, it can get really frustrating very quickly because it just seems like we can see what's going on and we can complain about what's going on and it can be really distracting. What it really does come down to is, what can we do about it? What can we actually really do about it? And that's where I believe what we're doing, Lacy, is we're offering a path forward, because we can't change the politics. We can't change the government. We can't change the banks and the way that they do things. Right?
Yeah, I think so too. And I think, like, you know, when I was reading and doing some online searches, his solution seems to be keep more ownership and profits inside of Canada. Well, doesn't that line up with what IBC can do for us? It helps us to keep more of our own profits and own that debt that we have. Because my dad said to me, like, you're always going to owe somebody something, right? Whether it's like your utility provider,
or your cell bill,
you have a mortgage or a cell bill, right? You're always going to owe somebody something. And so, like, if we can own that debt and we can keep those profits inside our own family banking system, like, hallelujah, can we please stop trying to rely on the government to create wealth for us? Because I'm sorry, it's like going to a hairdresser and her hair looks way worse than mine. I don't want her cutting my hair. I just don't. So Why am I going to take wealth building advice and invest in somebody's plan who we're already in so much debt as a country? There's no plan to get out of it. I mean, it doesn't seem to be. We're just going further and further in debt every year. And then we're going to borrow another $25 billion to create wealth. Give me a break. How about I just do it myself?
Well, amen to that, sister.
That's my rant for the day.
Yeah. So, and again, let's, in having fun inventing a little bit more, the word sovereignty really needs to be reclaimed for what it means. The reason why I think everyone's very skeptical about it, no matter what philosophical standpoint you're really coming from, is because we're nowhere close to being a sovereign country at this moment. Nowhere close, right? Because sovereignty ultimately means, in its simplest form, it's like ultimate authority or self-governance. A country that is sovereign when there's no outside power controls its decision. We're nowhere close to that at this moment. Not. It's like we have a lot of things to resolve within our own country before we should even be announcing something like this.
I was talking with Reed about it too. They were asked, like, okay, well, what kind of returns are there going to be? Well, they can't even answer that because they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know, does that seem like a good choice to make if somebody is telling you you don't know? I mean, have clients asked me questions that I don't know the answer to? Yeah. I assure them that I will get them the answer.
No matter what area of life we're coming from on a personal level or professional level, I think there's always more to learn and more to gain from. What's interesting is that, besides Norway being an example of the closest thing to a sovereign wealth fund, Norway was one of the first. Actually, the second is right here in our very own province, which is the Heritage Savings Trust Fund, which was actually created in the 1970s from oil royalties. And it's actually now worth over $30 trillion. But it really got dropped, depending on who's in power.
Right.
we really end up forgetting who's managing and who's maintaining that. Sometimes how closely we're looking after something is, if we're focusing on it, that's really great. And I think it was really focused on at the very beginning, and then it got dropped. And I think we could really learn a lot from, our federal government can really learn a lot from what Alberta did with the Heritage Savings Trust Fund, because that's pretty close to a sovereign wealth fund too, in an attempt. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's close to what we have for in-house, right. Canada.
Something to touch on like that, this came to my mind last week, and I'm always thinking about what can we share with our listeners that is valuable? And I just keep coming back to, we cannot rely on someone else to take care of us. We cannot rely on someone else to create wealth for us. We cannot rely on, and I've said this to my mom and dad, I don't live there. I'm not the one that is hands-on, when they age and should they need care. So I don't expect a handout. I don't expect them to leave us girls anything. And if they do, I sure don't expect for it to be equal to my sisters because I'm not there. My grandpa used to say, there's always people just waiting on a handout.
No, you got to say it the Texan way. Come on.
Well, this is a different saying. So and this is funny because we got into a conversation last week about Southern sayings and just comparing different accents and different sayings. But that was one of the things, are we sitting around just waiting on the government to give us a handout? Or are we going to get up and go to work ourselves and create what we want instead of waiting on, what the generation before us is going to leave to us or hand down to us? They don't have to do that. Your parents don't have to hand you down anything. And neither does the government. If you trust them.
Well, it's interesting that you're saying this, Lacy, because we stand for the infinite banking concept. And everything about it is because we share the same values around money and ownership. But believe it or not, this is why there's many different political parties like who don't, because there are some people who would rather just take a handout because it's easier. And that all comes from, how they were, like how everyone was raised. I guess it's not right or wrong. And as I become an older and older vintage of myself, right, it's just realizing that none of us are ever going to agree about what's the best way to live. I 100% am with you. I'd rather be responsible for me and know that I created my own results than waiting for someone else to do that for me. So interestingly enough, like the Canada Strong Fund is very philosophically opposed to the infinite banking concept in which we teach, right? Because he's saying sovereignty resides in the state. It should be mandated by the government. Capital pool is managed by the government. It's also funded by borrowed fiat currency. It's arm's length it's arm's length. So everything is created by them. You invest in the collective and it's debt funded. Whereas everything that we do is different. Like we believe sovereignty resides in the individual. The capital control is private. It's by us. It's grounded in sound money principles. It's contractually guaranteed growth, completely outside of political reach. And the structure being used is over 150 years old. And it's also built on uninterrupted compound growth. Like, when you start,
preach it.
When you start going down all these like items, it's like, it's just we keep wanting to talk about this with all of you because this all really matters and we can be our own solution. And this is probably the road to sanity because we don't have to give a shit about what they're doing. Anyhow.
Well, and just like Nelson said, like there's noise in the marketplace. There's noise everywhere we go. Just this morning, I was looking at Instagram and a lady she has over 2 million followers.
Wow.
She was talking about TikTok, actually. She deleted her TikTok account, and I'm sure she's earning revenue from her account. But she said that app, for me personally, was poison to my mind. So she deleted it. So that it's just like noise everywhere. And you have to pick what is right for you, what path is right for you. You know what? If you believe in the Sovereign Wealth Fund, go ahead, fill your boots. But I don't, and I don't think they have our best interests at heart. There is a better way than relying on somebody to have your best interests at heart. They can't care about your money more than you do, but they want to make you think that they do, and they don't.
Yeah. And I mean, again, what's really distracting about this whole Canada Strong Fund too is like, I kind of thought it was weird that, he'd announce something like this and not really have all the details of how it's going to all roll out.
Yeah. Seems shady.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like maybe that was 100% done on purpose, but it just seems like, okay, this is, is this like a smoke and mirrors? Let's give them something to talk about while we do something else.
That is exactly what Reed said. Oh, just another smoke and mirrors thing, like to fill your head full of crap, and then they don't even have the answers to the questions that the people have. And he is just like, yeah, it's just a bunch of smoke and mirrors. And wow, it drives me wild.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just think there are some people, Dave Ramsey, who say, why on earth whole life insurance? He says all this stuff, but it's like, so is your registered retirement savings plan, because you can't take that with you when you die. When he said he doesn't like whole life insurance, he's like, because you don't get to take your cash value when you die. No, you don't. But you don't get to take your RSP either. You have to leave it to your family, but your family gets a death benefit when you pay into a life insurance policy. So bark up somebody else's tree, because at least you get to use it while you're alive.
There's so many different financial advisors, including ourselves, all over Canada and all over US who have talked a lot about where maybe the gap is with Dave Ramsey, like 100%. Got to give kudos to the guy for getting to where he is today, with respect to at least not living beyond your means. But yeah, as far as what he understands about the insurance instrument, I feel there's a big gap there. And I think that he could eat a little bit of humble pie, honestly, be open to learning something new.
Yeah. So, okay, that's a good point that you made. Like 100%. Yeah. Like I've said that before. I have one of his books and I just always keep it because I do. But he does preach the don't live beyond your means. So let's go back to that. You know what? If all of us are living within our means and we're doing something to create that wealth for later on when we slow down and we're not working as much, guess what? We're not going to need to rely on the government or rely on somebody else to take care of us. If we're living beyond or living within our means in our working years where we are the most productive and the most able, guess what? Then when we get to that time, we've created the freedom to have choices. And so, yeah, I do think that Dave has a lot of great information, and that is one of them. But you're right. Understanding of insurance is lacking for sure.
And, coming back around to what this all really genuinely means is because this build this fund for us in the future. And I think everyone hands down agrees. It's like, well, we have some other major things to really take care of before we can really get there, essentially. And it doesn't matter. Again, like I was looking at all the stuff that was non-mainstream news and then looking at the stuff that was all mainstream, and hands down, at least everyone can agree on that, that this is bad news all the way around. And the one thing that the financial principle that the infinite banking concept solves is that, this is about control. And it's worth more than any interest rate that lower interest rate that you can get on a debt. Because the entity that holds your debt holds real power over your decisions and your options that you have. Just like if you're mortgaging something, your mortgage broker does. And so Canada does not have control even of itself right now. But we can put ourselves in the position where we can, if someone's got to own our debt, we might as well be the owner of our debt. One of the other things that I really wanted to say about this was that slow is fast. So what I mean by that is like, Lacy and I, one family at a time, one farm at a time, one ranch at a time, one business at a time, if we can show enough people to adopt like the sound money principles inside their own life, like building a private pool of money that compounds quietly and reliably, each one of us get to become less dependent on the bank, less dependent on the government. We don't necessarily have to give up on the government or give up on the banks, but we do need that form of ability to have options and control when we need it, because like you said before, Lacy, no one can care more about our own situation than us. We have to, like, the life that we live, the government and the banks can't help us when we need it the most. We have to help ourselves.
I like that. So do you have anything else to add?
Oh, there's probably a lot more to add there, but
we could talk all day, but we won't keep you here all day. So, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about this new Canada Strong Fund or, the trust fund that Alberta has had around for a long time. The governments are trying to build pools of capital so they can invest, grow, and control their own future. But what we need to be asking is, who's doing that for you? Are you doing that for you? If you're relying on banks, lenders, or outside institutions to finance your operation, your growth, or even your lifestyle, then you're always playing by their rules. And IBC can flip that script for you. Just like, to add to what you were saying, Winnie, IBC gives you the ability to build your own pool of capital, to finance your own decisions, to keep the interest, the control, and the flexibility in your hands where it belongs. That's what it's really about. It's not just about the money, freedom, ownership, and control over your future. So if this conversation got you thinking today, how can I be more in control? Head over to our website, ranchyourway.com. That's where you're going to be able to purchase the book bundle, so the paperback copy of Farming Without the Bank. It comes with the audio version now, which has been a complete game changer. And you can watch us on YouTube at the Winnie Podcast, or you can find us on Apple, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. We'll see you in the next episode.
So glad you leaned in with us on the Winnie Podcast. We truly hope you're feeling more informed and empowered to take another step towards optimizing your financial life. Right now, make sure you hit subscribe so you can keep growing and learning with us. Until next time, we wish you prosperity in every area of your life.